Hello, friends. This is Brad Hayes, and I want to share with you for just a few minutes my first 5 memories of visiting Dalton, Georgia. As a child and as a young adult living in Trine, Georgia, Dalton would be about a 45 or 50-minute drive, and I really never visited Dalton a lot when I was growing up or even as a young adult. But I want to share with you 5 memories of Dalton, Georgia. The first would be in the early to mid 1980s. I went over to Dalton with my grandmother, Evelyn Williams, and my uncle, Raymond Williams. And we were visiting my grandmother's first cousin. Her name was Gloria Touchstone. And I don't really remember exactly where she lived, but she lived somewhere near the hospital, Hamilton Hospital over in Dalton. And we visited her at her home, and then we took a little drive over to Doug Gap and visited the church and the cemetery where her parents and her siblings were buried. Gloria was the daughter of my grandmother's oldest brother, George Self. Her parents were George and Clemmy Self. And we visited with her in Dalton. And when we were about to leave, we decided to stop at a clothing store on Walnut Avenue. And I cannot remember the name of the store, but today there's a shopping center there, and Papa John's Pizza is in the little part of the shopping center where this store was in the mid 1980s. But I remember my grandmother Williams bought me a members only jacket. I can't remember the color, but I just remember she bought me a members only jacket because I had made the trip over to Dalton to visit her cousin, and my Uncle Raymond was there with us and he was driving. So this had to have been sometime before I was even 16, because I remember I wasn't driving and he was the driver when we made that visit. All right, second memory of Dalton, Georgia would also be in the 1980s. We would go Highway 151 and we would cross over the mountain at Houston Valley and come out over on Highway 201, and then we'd drive kind of on the outskirts of Dalton to get over to where Cleveland Highway is. And then we'd go north on Cleveland Highway. And what I remember is a group of church members from Pleasant Grove would drive over the mountain and go down Cleveland Highway and eat at a place called Catfish Junction. I don't think it was in business very long, and there might have even been other Catfish Junctions in the Chattanooga area. But I remember going with the Days and the Sprayberries and the Campbells, and my mom and my dad and I would go with them. And it was, like I say, a group from church. We'd go over and they would serve seafood. And they would put it in these large bowls, and you just pass the bowls around and get food, fill your plate up, and they'd have sides like French fries and coleslaw and hush puppies. They'd be in these large bowls, and you'd eat seafood and sides. And it was good food, I remember. But like I say, we only went a few times, and I don't even remember exactly where it was on Cleveland Highway. All right, third memory. Also, 1980s, when I was in high school at Trine, we would go cruising. And whenever we would go cruising in Dalton, we would cruise around Walnut Square Mall. And we didn't go a lot, but I remember going over there a couple of times when I was in high school, and that's the area where everybody would cruise. And of course, Walnut Square Mall is still there today on Walnut Avenue, but I don't think teenagers cruise anymore like we used to in the 1980s. But if we ever went to Rome, You know, we'd cruise around Riverbend Mall. Well, in Dalton, the place to cruise on the weekends, Friday night, Saturday night, would be at Walnut Square Mall. My fourth memory was back in 1995. I was in my third year teaching and coaching at Gordon Central High School in Gordon County. And Coach Vernon Jackson was the head football coach, and I was one of the assistant coaches. And we had played Dalton High School in the regular season that year, and they beat us 10-7. It was a close game, but they beat us. But we made the playoffs. And in the first round of the playoffs, we beat Dalton on October the 6th is when Dalton beat us 10-7. But in the playoffs, we beat Dalton on November 17th by a score of 22-10. And that was the first round of the playoffs. So then we went and played Westminster, which would be a private school in the Atlanta area. We beat them. And that was the second round, and so we advanced to the third round of the playoffs in 1995, and we got beat by Cedar Shoals High School. But that was a great football season that year at Gordon Central. We were so successful because we made all the way into the third round of the playoffs, and Vernon Jackson was the head coach. All right, my fifth and final memory of Dalton, Georgia was 9/11. Everybody's going to always ask the question, where were you when the Twin Towers were bombed? When those planes crashed into the Twin Towers in New York? Well, on September the 11th, 2001, Judy and I had taken Luke to the dentist office, and the dentist was Dr. David J. Cassidy, and Dr. Cassidy's office was at 1403 Doug Gap Road, Dalton. And so we were sitting in the waiting area when the news come on the TVs that there had been plane crashed into the towers in New York. Also, the Pentagon had been hit, and a plane had gone down in a field in Pennsylvania. So all of this was taking place and on the news while we were in the doctor's office in Dalton, and Luke was there to see the dentist. So 5 memories of Dalton, Georgia.